The woman called Marilla arrived at the towering wreck every morning, boots pressing into the gritty soil as though she owned this forgotten world. Her scarf fluttered behind her in the crisp air, while she peered through tinted goggles at the colossal vessel that dwarfed everything else in sight. It had been there for more years than anyone cared to count, rumored to have crashed 7 centuries before the current age rumors. Aside, nobody else bothered to come except her. She found a mixture of fascination and quiet challenge in this towering craft, whose lights still flickered at odd intervals despite centuries without repair. Local myth insisted the ship contained something more than rusted corridors and stale oxygen, but no one had dared investigate properly. Marilla loved a challenge, and her unconventional upbringing had primed her for an obsession with anything improbable. She whistled at the scale of the vessel. Its hull rose like a massive fortress, layered plating half buried by sediment and twisted roots clinging to every corner. Even from her vantage, it was obvious the interior corridors had partially collapsed, leaving compartments inaccessible without some serious excavation gear. She had none of that. Instead, she used a battered rope and a grappling device that she occasionally made fun of, calling it her snag and rattle contraption. It never failed her, but it rattled so much it sounded like an angry hive of insects. That jarring noise drew local wildlife out of hiding, leaving them hissing at her from behind thick vines. She rewarded them with a flippant wave and continued climbing. She was determined to see the same section of the deck each morning, the same place she had begun patrolling 3 years earlier. Up on the platform, she found the vantage she loved. 2 smaller moons hovered overhead, stark white against a burnt sky, while the main star glowed in the distance. Enormous of petrified vines jutted from the ground around the wreck, forming a labyrinth of natural spires. She admired how the steel walls of the abandoned spaceship contrasted with the golden haze that settled over the environment. At sunrise, she settled on a ledge near a corroded hatch and muttered, "Another day, another silent hulk. If you start talking, at least wait until I've had my morning meal." Then she patted the hull as if comforting an injured companion. The irony never escaped her. She was a pirate by trade, rummaging contraband, intercepting shady cargo, and picking through cosmic debris for valuable components. Yet here she was devoting her first hours each day to gawking at a dead warship. Everyone else considered it worthless. She saw possibility in anything others labeled beyond salvage. That drew laughter from her associates, but she didn't mind. Curiosity drove her more than profit, and that morning was no exception. She opened the bat-ed hatch with a crowbar repurposed from an old landing strut, marveling at how the corridor always groaned when she forced it inside. Fractured beams hung overhead, cables trailed along the floor, and a faint mechanical hum pulsed in the background. She liked to imagine the original crew stomping through these alleys in crisp uniforms. She pictured them standing around control panels, strategizing their next maneuvers. She'd found etched insignias a few times, and elegant crest featuring an alien script and a stylized serpent. This told her the vessel likely belonged to a civilization known for advanced biotech and unusual navigation technologies. Hardly any official records remained about them, but folk tales circulated in remote outposts. Whenever she asked around, the bartenders and smugglers would direct her to contradictory stories, each more dramatic than the last. That only fueled her investigation. Her daily routine involved stepping over collapsed supports, shining a light onto the chipped plating, and poking her head into compartments that might hold artifacts. The place smelled of rust and old chemicals, though ventilators occasionally roared to life, shocking her with blasts of stale air. She would grin at those moments, as if the ship teased her. She reciprocated by joking under her breath, "If you're going to blow dusty air at me, at least do it on a warmer setting." She had no illusions that the craft was truly conscious. However, everything about its design suggested advanced systems that defied the engineering norms of other species. She sensed an intelligence still buried in these corridors, waiting. After weeks of picking through data cores that refused to boot, she discovered a sealed chamber deep below the main deck. She'd found the door by chance, shining her flashlight across a bulkhead that looked too pristine to be ancient. A sensor near the door beeped the moment her hand approached it. That beep made her heart skip. She placed her palm against the panel, and a green light illuminated around her fingers. Something inside the system recognized a pattern. That door slid open with a metallic hiss, revealing a room that defied the rest of the vessel's decaying interior. The surfaces were immaculate, the lighting panels radiated a faint glow, and the entire atmosphere carried a subtle shimmering effect. It was too perfect for a 742-year-old ruin. She soon realized that the facility served a medical purpose, or so she hypothesized. From the presence of sealed pods lining the walls, each was shaped like a vertical cylinder with a transparent shield revealing an occupant that resembled a humanoid figure with elongated limbs. Some pods were cracked or empty, but one remained fully intact occupant inside, a tall alien with pale features and ridges along the scalp. If rumors were correct, these were the so-called serpentine scholars known for cryptic experiments. She carefully approached the pod and noticed faint lines of data scrolling on an embedded screen. She recognized some alien glyphs from the partial logs she had read upstairs. They indicated that this occupant was alive in stasis. She found herself inhaling sharply. There was life in this place. Each morning after that discovery, she returned, not just to see the sunrise from the deck, but also to observe the occupant inside that pod. She liked to talk to it, feeling absurd, yet compelled. If you decide to wake up, she would quip, do it gently. I'm not in the mood for dramatic reanimations. Then she'd run a hand over the console, hoping to glean more information. It became a habit. Climbed the exterior, observed the sunrise shining off the battered hull as she stood on the vantage, then descend to the hidden chamber and check on the OCC occupant. She was aware of the historical tension between humans and the serpentine scholars. Long ago, these beings had introduced advanced weaponry to certain factions in the galaxy that had triggered catastrophic wars on multiple worlds. Official records labeled them as troublemakers or even conspirators, yet no one proved whether they were malicious or just dangerously curious. She wondered if this single occupant might hold clues about that era. One afternoon, as her footsteps echoed through the hushed corridors, she sensed something had changed. The corridor lights brightened in sequence, guiding her steps. She felt as if the vessel was responding to her presence. She tried to maintain her composure, but a prickle of excitement formed at the base of her neck. She reached the hidden chamber to find the occupant's eyes partially open, gazing through the transparent cover. She nearly dropped her flashlight. The occupant's lips moved, but no sound emerged. Hesitantly, she set her hand on the console. A whisper emanated from unseen speakers. Identify yourself. The voice was unsteady. She froze, pulse hammering. I'm Mirella, Captain Will X. Captain of a small ship, if that matters, she answered, injecting a bit of sarcasm. You've been taking a pretty long nap. Silence followed, then the occupant's voice returned, layered with static. Why do you linger here each day? The question was direct, neither threatening nor friendly, leaving her uncertain how to respond. She shrugged at the cylindrical pod. I come for the view, and for some reason I can't let this husk rot away without answers. This ship shouldn't be functional after all these centuries. The occupant's eyelids closed as if in brief contemplation. Systems remain operational because my kind built them to endure. Our mission was vital. She found herself leaning closer, curiosity devouring caution. Mission? All I see is a warship that crashed in the middle of nowhere. The occupant's tone grew sharper. This craft was never designed for conquest. It was an ark for knowledge. The war was forced upon us. That made her snort in disbelief. She'd heard countless accounts describing these aliens as architects of unstoppable weaponry, but none had described them as mere gatherers of knowledge. She let the occupant speak for another few minutes, gleaning bits of history, an alliance fractured by political sabotage, a catastrophic betrayal that forced them to flee, and eventually, the crash on this desert planet. Most of the crew perished. The occupant, named VRA, was the final caretaker of sealed data that could either reignite ancient feuds or lead to better understanding among the fractious species across the galaxy. Mirella found the notion unusual. She wanted to press for more details, but VRA's voice faded, and the occupant sank back into stasis. She tapped the console in vain. Oh, you can't toss me that monumental revelation and then go back to sleep. The next morning, she scaled the hull even faster, ignoring the creaking plates and the gritty dust swirling in the dawn light. She gazed at the battered vessel for a moment, noticing how the rising sun illuminated the floating dust motes near the ship's bow. It was precisely the sight reflected in the image that had drawn her here. The massive silhouette of the crashed craft cast elongated shadows across the spires while the horizon glowed. She allowed herself a few breaths of that surreal scene, letting the drama of this world sink in. She reminded herself that this was exactly what she pictured whenever she recounted her stories to fellow pirates. It always sounded too grand to be real, yet here it was. She hurried inside, descending into the hidden chamber. This time, the occupant was upright, pressing a spidery hand against the transparent cover. A faint purple fluid drained from the pod's base with a hiss. The cylinder unlocked. Viore stepped out, muscles trembling as they attempted to stand. Morella reflexively offered an arm for support. The alien accepted the gesture with a calm nod, though the expression on that elongated face remained guarded. "You've come daily," Viore said, voice scratchy. "Your dedication is unexpected." Morella tossed a wry grin. "Don't get the wrong idea. I'm not your caretaker. My curiosity just keeps me returning like clockwork." Viore narrowed their eyes. "You call yourself a pirate, but you speak as if you care about deeper truths." Contradiction. She laughed, patting the console. "Piracy is a job that pays the bills. And anyway, I never said I was a good pirate." Viore tilted their head as if measuring her honesty, then retrieved a small device from a compartment in the wall, keyed in a sequence, and activated a portion of the console. Swirling glyphs appeared, displaying star charts, trade routes, and something that looked suspiciously like advanced weapons schematics. Morella felt her stomach tighten. "Are you serious? This is a blueprint for mass destruction." Viore's brow furrowed in annoyance. "It was originally a defensive measure, but certain powers twisted it to their own aims. My crew attempted to preserve the original design so that a countermeasure could be developed, not an enhanced weapon. We failed. War spread. Empires fell. My people vanished." Morella studied the swirling data, dismayed that a single blueprint could potentially spark conflict again. She glanced at the solemn expression on Viore's face and sensed no obvious deception. Steadying her voice, she asked, "So what's the plan? Upload these designs to some unsuspecting system? Because that would be catastrophic." Viore exhaled slowly, then typed more commands, revealing an additional set of schematics. These new images depicted an energy device that absorbed destructive power and rerouted it into stable infrastructure. In simpler terms, it converted lethal force into technology that promoted growth. "My species believed in repurposing aggression," Viore said, tapping the display. "Though we excelled at engineering, we were naive about interstellar politics. We thought we could persuade warlike factions to see the logic in transformation. Instead, some used partial schematics to design unstoppable cannons. My final duty is to ensure the completed plans reach a secure archive so any civilization seeking to adopt them must use the entire design. It wouldn't be feasible to build a weapon from one fragment alone." Morella's mind spun, imagining the black market value of such knowledge. She also recognized the likely uproar if these plans fell into the wrong hands. Rubbing the back of her neck, she muttered, "So your mission is to deliver a blueprint for harnessing destructive power. You basically want to keep this from fueling another arms race." Viore nodded, standing more steadily now. "Precisely. But I lack a vessel and allies. My original crew is gone. Though they remain preserved in failing pods, I fear only a handful might be revived. Even if they awaken, we're stranded." Morella flashed that half-grin that always preceded her questionable ideas. "Stranded, yes, but I happen to know a few smugglers with a side interest in historical artifacts. If we position the data as worthless, we might slip it through certain bureaucratic checkpoints." Viore studied her face, uncertain. "Why would you help me? Your reputation suggests you just sell the data to the highest bidder." She snickered. "You're not entirely wrong, but you've got me hooked on the story of how your people tried to shift the cosmic balance. That kind of ambition, it's more interesting than petty thievery." She gave a half-shrug. "Besides, I can't keep climbing this wreck forever. It's already done a number on my gear." Viore offered a polite inclination of the head, acknowledging her stance. "Then let's see how far we get before the galaxy notices we're stirring up old secrets." Morella led the alien through the corridors, helping them gather any portable data from the damaged consoles. Meanwhile, Viore reactivated minimal ship functions, preserving the stasis pods of the remaining crew until more resources could be found. They scouted a few areas that might yield salvageable components for powering the primary engines. Unexpectedly, they discovered older compartments concealed behind layers of corroded plating. One section contained canisters of specialized fuel, sealed so effectively that it remained stable. Another revealed a series of defensive drones, deactivated but intact. Morella insisted on leaving the drones behind, whispering that they'd cause more complications if accidentally triggered. Their conversation took comedic turns. At one point, while lugging a heavy coil of cable, Morella turned to VRA. "You sure your species never built anything lighter? My arms are about to detach, and I'd rather keep them." VRA's tone carried that same measured calm. "Had we known you'd be the one hauling it 742 years later, we might have considered ergonomics more carefully." She rolled her eyes, muttering about ungrateful stowaways who teased her while she did the grunt work. Despite her mock annoyance, she found herself smiling, realizing she'd never had this level of banter with an alien before. The galaxy was a complicated tapestry of feuding powers, yet here they were, forging an odd alliance in the dusty remains of a once mighty craft. Who stared at it skeptically. "Go on," she said, feigning innocence. "It only tastes like cardboard." For the first few bites, the alien took a hesitant nibble, face contorting with each chew. "At least your honesty is consistent," she responded with a quick retort. "If I told you it was delicious, you'd never trust me again." After stabilizing the main power node, they spent 2 days testing navigational subroutines. The ship's hull was too compromised for flight, but a short hover might be possible. Unfortunately, as soon as they tried to activate the thrusters, an explosion rattled the engineering decks. Boom! Debris soared through the passage, forcing them to dive behind a structural brace. Sparks showered the entire bay, and a plume of black smoke rose. Morella coughed and shouted, "That's your advanced design in action." VRA glared at the charred console. "The sabotage inflicted centuries ago compromised vital thruster lines. Without replacement components, we risk more blasts." She rubbed her sore face. "Great, so we're grounded. Guess we're contacting some of my business associates." One of her main points of contact was an older ex-smuggler known for a questionable sense of humor and an extensive network. He arrived by midday with a rickety cargo ship that made Morella's own craft look luxurious. Still, it was enough. Getting VRA on board proved easy enough once they convinced the old smuggler to turn a blind eye to the alien's unusual physiology. That didn't stop him from cracking jokes. "This friend of yours is tall and pale. Sure they're not a vampire from some dusty legend?" Morella retorted. "Don't tempt me to let them feed on your sarcasm." VRA simply observed their bickering, a hint of amusement flickering in those elongated eyes. They plotted a route toward a remote research station rumored to keep archives on xenotechnological breakthroughs. Perhaps these researchers could store the encrypted data in a safe environment, preventing it from winding up in the wrong hands. The journey was tense. Word spread that a notorious pirate was hauling contraband. The old smuggler panicked at the thought of being intercepted by patrolling warships. He proposed jettisoning VRA if threatened. Mela glared at him, threatening to open the airlock on him instead if he so much as voiced that idea again. Predictably, after 3 days in transit, a military frigate intercepted them. The comm channel crackled with a stern officer's demand: "Surrender your vessel for inspection." The old smuggler cursed under his breath and cut the engines. VRA retreated to the cargo hold while Morella composed herself on the flight deck. She wore a battered jacket with no insignia, hoping to pass as a low-level shipping grunt. When the frigate's inspection team boarded, they fanned out with practiced efficiency, scanning for suspicious cargo. Morella feigned annoyance, complaining about arbitrary seizures of personal effects. She even accompanied them to the cargo hold. The moment they spotted a tall figure in an unfamiliar environment suit, they raised rifles. "Who's that?" demanded the lead inspector. Morella, rolling her eyes, stepped forward. "Relax, that's my salvage partner. They're from a quarantine colony, so we keep them suited up. Hardly contraband." One soldier insisted on a deeper scan. At that point, the tension spiked. VRA's posture stiffened, though the alien remained silent. The scanner beeped, presumably detecting unusual vital signs. The lead inspector was about to call for backup when Morella cleverly unleashed one of her snag and rattle grappling hooks, not at the soldiers but at an overhead crate labeled sedative gas. Handled with caution, she pulled the crate down with a resounding crash. Crack! Boom! The canisters burst, releasing a swirl of pale vapor. Soldiers coughed and staggered. Morella and VRA hurried to the corridor As the old smuggler slammed the hatch, sealing the inspection team behind a bulkhead, they sprinted back to the cockpit, fired the engines, and made a frantic jump away from the frigate's tractor range. Morella's heart pounded, but she let out a triumphant whoop. Never thought that crate of gas would come in handy. VRA gave her a glance of grudging admiration. Your improvised tactics are effective. We should depart this sector before reinforcements arrive. The old smuggler hammered the controls, sending them into faster-than-light travel. Everyone breathed more easily once the sensors indicated no immediate pursuit. After the tension eased, VRA questioned her with a hint of wry humor. Is smuggling always this stressful? She offered a sideways grin, leaning back in the co-pilot seat. Actually, this was tame. Next time I'll show you real danger. They eventually reached the designated research station orbiting a dead world. Morella and VRA carried the encrypted data on a portable drive, stepping into a facility that reeked of sterilizing chemicals. White-clad staff drifted between labs, many sporting ocular implants. The station's director recognized the significance of the data the moment they began scanning it. Their eyes widened at the possibility of advanced weapon designs hidden within. Morella exhaled wearily, anticipating greed. Relax, she muttered to the director. You won't be able to decipher it without the entire encryption key, and even then you'll need VRA's final sequences to build the actual contraption that diffuses lethal systems. The director's expression flickered with frustration, then acceptance. They offered a formal agreement. The station would keep the data locked in a secure chamber, and only grant partial access for legitimate researchers under strict oversight. Seeing that conclusion, Morella frowned in mild suspicion. You're not planning to replicate the weaponry, are you? The director insisted on focusing on the beneficial portion of the designs. Our interest lies in harnessing destructive energy for infrastructure, not in fueling further wars. VRA remained watchful. We will remain here until the encryption is fully integrated into your archives. If we sense betrayal, my people's legacy will be erased from the drive. Morella respected that stance and assisted in calibrating the final transfer. After hours of advanced scanning and triple checks, the station concluded the process. VRA nodded in relief. The data was out of immediate danger and stored within an environment that might ensure no single individual could exploit it without the balancing blueprint. Morella felt an odd pang of satisfaction. She realized that this entire journey from the battered ruin on that harsh planet to the station's sterile corridors had changed her perspective more than any amount of typical piracy. She joked to VRA, if anyone told me I'd risk my neck just to deliver some cosmic blueprint for technology that turns destructive power into something constructive, I'd have slapped them. But maybe I was bored with the usual scavenging. The alien gave a small, almost human-like smirk. Sometimes we find ourselves in unlikely roles. They parted ways with the old smuggler, who insisted on receiving some form of compensation for the risk. Morella promised a cut from the salvage rights to the ship's hull, which might still hold valuable alloys. He grumbled, but accepted, cracking one last jest. This escapade is going to haunt my dreams, but at least I'll have enough credits for retirement. She and VRA stayed on the station for another week, ensuring no hidden subroutines remained in the data transfer. The staff ran simulations to confirm the technology's potential for constructive infrastructure. No anomalies surfaced. Satisfied, Morella prepared her own small ship to leave. VRA, having no immediate place to go, followed her to the docking bay. She pointed out 2 seats in her cockpit, then patted the control panel. I'll drop you wherever you want, or you can roam with me a while. I might have use for a bright mind on future treasure hunts. VRA studied her with that calm gaze. I suspect we have more to learn about each other's worlds. I'll accompany you until I'm certain my people's legacy is secure. Morella's grin reappeared as she hopped into the pilot seat. Suit yourself, I warn you, you'll have to put up with subpar cooking and questionable music selections. VRA settled into the co-pilot chair. I've eaten your protein bars. My standards are already lowered. Moments later, the thrusters roared and the ship drifted from the station, setting a course for open space. Morella gazed at the star-filled void beyond the viewport. She realized that for the first time in ages she felt no compulsion to chase a quick payout. Instead, she found a sense of thrill in forging an uncertain path. She teased VRA, don't expect me to greet you every sunrise on this meadow. Can the view isn't as nice as that desert planet? VRA answered without missing a beat. The sunrise was only half the motivation, the rest was your curiosity. She groaned in mock exasperation. I knew it, you were just humoring me with that stasis chamber routine. VRA gave a faint laugh. I never said that. Their banter was interrupted by an incoming hail from a passing freighter requesting to trade sensor data. Morella eyed VRA, who nodded. She opened the channel. Adopting that smooth-talking voice she used whenever an unsuspecting merchant was on the line, the comedic dynamic between them promised a bizarre but entertaining voyage ahead. In the weeks that followed, Marilla occasionally received encrypted transmissions from the research station confirming that the technology was in stable hands. No major powers were aware of the archived designs. Meanwhile, she and VRA found themselves chasing leads about smaller relics, some belonging to the vanished Serpentine scholars. Each new artifact presented fresh glimpses into an era of cosmic ambition, political intrigue, and misguided warfare. VRA's underlying sarcasm surfaced more often, usually when local troublemakers tried to swindle them. Marilla matched it with her own brand of acerbic humor, forging an unlikely partnership that made them a force to reckon with. During a final stopover on a dusty trade hub, they encountered an official from a distant empire known for its intelligence gathering he recognized VRA's distinctive features and cornered them in a dingy marketplace. The official demanded a private meeting, insinuating that he knew about the data. Marilla, unimpressed, retorted that he must be delusional given how many tall, pale folks traversed the galaxy. The official threatened to arrest them if they refused cooperation, brandishing an old decree that labeled the Serpentine scholars as war criminals. VRA kept quiet, letting Marilla do the talking. She pretended to read the official's documents, squinting and tilting her head, then she dropped them on the ground with an exaggerated sigh. These edicts are centuries outdated. You'd have better luck arresting a fossil. Before the stunned official could respond, VRA discreetly pressed a concealed device that disrupted the local scanning equipment. The official's handheld scanner died with a crackle. Marilla seized that moment to yank VRA aside, darting between market stalls loaded with questionable produce, and squealing livestock. Shouts followed behind them, but the official's voice became lost in the ruckus of outraged vendors. They ducked into an alley, stealing a moment to breathe. VRA let out a quiet exhale. Are you always this inventive at evasion? She gave a crooked grin. I prefer the term resourceful. Now let's slip away before our friend gathers enough cronies. They negotiated a backdoor bribe to a cargo pilot who agreed to ferry them off the trade hub in a battered shuttle. No questions asked. Hours later they were safe aboard Marilla's small ship, again heading for more remote territory. She checked the sensors to confirm no pursuers, then let out a chuckle. That official had quite the nerve, calling you a war criminal when your only crime is sleeping in a stasis pod for centuries. VRA massaged their elongated wrists, a sign of lingering tension. Perhaps one day we'll clear the record properly. For now, stealth is our best approach. Marilla rotated her pilot's seat, wearing an amused smirk. Stealth suits me. Pirates appreciate the quiet path. She rummaged in a storage locker, retrieving a battered cloth bag. You hungry? I think I still have some protein bars that taste like stale rubber. The alien's eyes narrowed in mock dread. I'll pass, but your generosity is noted. Soon they sat quietly, drifting through a star-studded expanse, the hum of the engines the only consistent sound. Marilla let her gaze wander over the controls. She pictured the enormous wreck that started this journey, with its battered hull angled against the sunrise that turned metal plates into a golden spectacle. The memory lingered like a surreal dream that had somehow launched an interstellar escapade. She faced VRA, letting out a long breath. So about that hidden message you were supposed to deliver, I guess we delivered it after all, just not to the original recipients. VRA's expression brightened slightly. Perhaps this was always the intended path. My people valued the knowledge that even chaotic forces can be redirected. Marilla raised an eyebrow. Redirected, but not erased, right? We didn't exactly rid the galaxy of dangerous tech. VRA nodded. True, yet at least the information is placed where it won't ignite more violence. That's better than letting it rust in a half-buried vault. She couldn't argue with that. Then she flicked a few switches on the comm panel, turning to VRA with a mischievous glint. Our next job is waiting somewhere out there. If we stumble upon another centuries-old puzzle, we might as well crack it open. VRA half smiled. I wouldn't expect anything less. Just refrain from dropping sedative gas crates on me. She let out a bark of laughter, slapping the console. No promises. If you annoy me enough, I might do it just for comedic effect. The two exchanged a conspiratorial look, forging a bond born from shared crisis and mutual respect. Outside the viewport, cosmic dust swirled in dazzling patterns, as if inviting them toward the next twist in their unpredictable voyage. Days later, they parked the ship in orbit around a tranquil ocean planet to refuel. While gazing at the planet's aqua surface from the observation deck, Marilla found herself recalling how uncertain she felt that first morning at the wreck. Scanning the battered alien craft at sunrise, she had wondered if it might house a ghost. Instead, it housed a living puzzle with enough knowledge to transform entire worlds. She released a breathy chuckle at the memory of her daily climbs along the rusted hull. VRA, who had been studying sensor logs, turned around. Something amuses you? Marilla shook her head, grinning, just remembering how I used to pat the hull and say, if you start talking, do it after my morning meal. Now it looks like we haven't shut up since we met. VRA caught on but only offered a huff of amusement. When they finished refueling, the station clerk approached them with a bill that was far steeper than expected. Marilla made a show of rummaging through her credit chips, counting them. Theatrically funny how the price triples whenever they see a battered spaceship with questionable registration. VRA glanced at her, then at the clerk, who tapped an impatient foot. She let out a frustrated sigh, but then flashed that trademark smirk. Would you mind stepping into the cargo area? I got a rare relic there that might cover the difference. The clerk raised an intrigued eyebrow and followed her. Moments later, the clerk emerged carrying a small decorative panel that came from the crashed warship's corridor. Marilla had polished it to look valuable but stripped it of any real functionality. The clerk beamed, convinced it was an artifact worth double the fuel costs. Marilla winked at VRA, who suppressed a smirk. They boarded once more, setting their course for the next point of interest. As the engines roared to life, she swiveled in her seat and locked eyes with VRA. It's official, I'm a terrible pirate. I just gave away a worthless scrap in exchange for fuel that cost a fortune. And yet, somehow, I feel like I got the better deal. VRA crossed their arms, unimpressed. We both know you enjoy outsmarting people who overcharge. She gave an exaggerated shrug. True. A little cosmic mischief keeps things interesting. VRA's tone carried a dry sarcasm. I suppose you're learning from a master. I could give you pointers on moral nuance, but that might conflict with your chosen profession. She placed a hand on her chest, feigning offense. Hey, I have moral nuance. I just prefer to keep things entertaining. The journey continued smoothly, thanks to discreet travel routes. They had no intention of broadcasting their location to the larger powers. With their latest data secured at the station, they felt more at ease. Each day brought new schemes, witty exchanges, and glimpses of cosmic intrigue. They even debated reviving more of VRA's kin from stasis, once they could ensure safe conditions. Meanwhile, Marilla compiled a list of trade opportunities that minimized the risk of crossing major militaries. Eventually, a lead came through her comm. A small frontier outpost needed an experienced team to track down a missing explorer in an uncharted nebula. She glanced at VRA. Easy credits. Interested? The alien gave a weary yet intrigued nod. As long as it doesn't involve incompetent station clerks or ancient sabotage, I'm in. She smirked. No promises. Where's the fun in that? Engaging the autopilot, she leaned back and propped her boots on the console. Her mind drifted briefly to that morning on the desert planet, where an ancient ship loomed against the blazing sky, casting long shadows over twisted vegetation. The memory was so vivid she could almost feel the warmth of the sunrise on her skin. In that moment, she realized their journey had been an unpredictable tapestry of absurdity and wonder. An unlikely partnership between a mischievous pirate and an alien guardian of lost knowledge. With a wry grin, she switched off the overhead lights, leaving only the soft glow of the navigation screens. We've come a long way from you sleeping in a glass tube, she teased. VRA raised a brow. And you climbing that wreck at dawn? I still haven't decided which was more reckless. She reached over and tapped a control, pulling up a rotating model of their next destination. Let's see if we can top it. The engines rumbled with renewed intensity, propelling them toward the unknown. Marilla arched an eyebrow at VRA. Strap in. I have a feeling we're about to outdo ourselves. VRA's measured response carried a flicker of amusement. I won't argue. Just try to warn me before crashing any cargo this time. As the ship surged into faster-than-light travel, there were no lingering doubts, no unresolved mysteries demanding closure. Their alliance, however unconventional, was solid, delightfully unpredictable yet steadfast. The greatest twist wasn't hidden among distant stars or ancient ruins, but in the simple fact that two entirely different beings had turned an old crisis into an enduring partnership. No grand speeches were necessary, no moral dilemmas weighed them down. Just the steady hum of the engines, two kindred spirits forging ahead into the vast unknown, and more than enough banter to keep the voyage entertaining. Marilla let the streaks of starlight fill her view, then cracked a grin. From dawn raids on old ships to scamming a clerk for fuel in record time, if that's not progress, I don't know what is. Viore gave a knowing nod. It's a conclusion that suits us both. And with that, the ship vanished into the void, leaving behind no loose ends, only infinite possibilities ahead.